The Secrets of Technology is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Technology. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Technology, where we discuss the technology news that's important to you from a uniquely Catholic point of view. And joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going, Dom?
Very well, thanks. And Joanne Mercier. Hi, Joanne.
Hi, Dom.
Folks, before we get into our topics today, I want to tell you about another show on the network that you are sure to enjoy called The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows, where we talk about all kinds of movies. We're coming up soon. We're going to be talking about The Godfather Part 3. We have Coffee and Cinema is back with Father Chip and I. Yes, we haven't done this for 2 years because of COVID. And so we're back going to the movies and then giving you our first impressions right after. And our first topic is going to be the new movie Father Stew, which really good. And Jaws is coming up. We got so many good movies coming up. Man for All Seasons. So it's looking like it's going to be a fun summer of movies. So definitely check it out wherever you find podcasts or at sqpn.com/secrets. So before we get started, I've got a little bit of a tip I want to share with you. Another one of Dom's Tales of Woe.
Uh-oh.
Yes.
Wah, wah.
So my daughter comes to me with her Kindle, the regular Kindle 10th generation, not a Paperwhite, just the regular cheaper one. And all my kids have Kindles now. And she brings her Kindle to me and says, it won't start. And it says at the bottom, waking up. And she says, it's been like that for a day. And she had it plugged in. She thought the battery was dead, but she plugged it in and it didn't work. So I did some research, and these are the troubleshooting steps that I found online that work. So first step is you hold the power button for 40 seconds, which is forever when you're holding a power button, but hold it for 40 seconds. You should see if something happens, the screen might flash or the charging light, the little light that's either green or amber, might blink. But if nothing happens, plug it into a charging port and try it again, 40 seconds. Nothing happens, plug it into a different port, like maybe into a USB port in your computer. Try it again. If it still doesn't work, wait 20 minutes, try again. Keep doing this. It could take, as some people were saying, hours of this. I'm like, yeah, Amazon, what is wrong with you? Like, this is the worst troubleshooting experience that you can have. Like, people talk about Apple iPhones and iPads being, like little black boxes that you can't really do anything with. This is worse than that. In any case, what happened was when she plugged it in, she hadn't plugged it in and done the reset button. When I plugged it in, did the reset button, the screen changed, and I got an icon of like a battery icon with an exclamation point. And my guess is she ran the battery down to like absolute zero. And so it needed a charge. And when it gets down that low, the firmware or whatever, it gets locked up. So you need to plug it in, do the reset. And then it took another, say, 15 or 20 minutes before it actually booted. It had enough charge in the battery to reboot, and then it was fine. So I was this close to just like, I have to buy another Kindle. I mean, I actually ordered a new one, and then I thought, I really ought to check this. And so I did the whole thing and canceled the order, and things are much better. Saved myself a bunch of money that way.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. So if you ever get into a situation where your Kindle won't start or it seems locked up and nothing, try these steps. It's a real hassle, but yeah.
It makes me go ahead.
I was gonna say, I wonder if it's a way to protect the battery. Because of course, like lithium-ion batteries, you do not want to run them flat.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's probably a protection thing. Yeah.
But it's just the scary thing is repeat for several hours. That's scary.
You can just spend your day resetting your Kindle. I did it, put it down, did other work, came back, looked at it, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's kind of ridiculous how much work it is to get that working. So, all right. So let's move on to our main topic for today, which is we'd mentioned a few weeks ago that a listener had written in about what to do with an older Mac, and that you really can't run it can't run any of the brand new like macOS Monterey. It's really get kind of obsolete. So what could she do with it? Could she put Linux on her Mac? And so we said, well, let's see what happens when we do. And Father Cory volunteered an old iMac of the same vintage, by the way, that the listener wrote in with, and just about. And you installed Linux on it, and you wanted to tell us a bit about how the experience was. So if you could start just by telling us what kind of Mac you've got, what kind of hardware that you're working with there, to give people an idea of what age of Mac this would be good for.
Yeah, so this was actually my first Mac. I'd been a Mac opponent for years and years and years, because used other operating systems and so on, including Linux, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But but this particular device is a iMac 2009 21.5 inch. I bought it in 2010. I bought it as one of the refurbished models. So of course saved a bunch of money doing that way. By the way, that's a hint. If you need Mac devices, refurbished is your friend.
Oh yes, refurbs.
And so I had the thing sitting out in the garage and brought it in and started playing with it. Now I've been using Linux for a while. I'm not quite as big a Linux advocate as some of our other tech members.
Right.
Thomas Sanjurjo, I believe, is one of them who's very strong on it.
Father Joseph and Jack are both
and Jack,
Linux guys. Yeah,
big time Linux guys. But I've been using Linux since 1995. So almost 30 years. I used it. For those who are familiar with Linux, if you've heard the term Slackware Linux, that was my first distro, all 20 disks downloading over the Air Force T1, because I didn't have a choice in the matter. I had dial up or do it that way. When I was at seminary, I used Linux as my primary operating system. So I've used Linux for years. I'm very familiar with Linux. I still run Linux today. So it's something I know well.
Great. And so what version of Linux did you decide to install on this one?
So I tried a couple different versions, and one that I tried that seemed to work the best for me was Linux Mint, but it's Linux Mint with what they call LXDE. The desktop environment is a lighter desktop environment. Okay. The caveat that I really want to say is when you're talking about which version, which distro to use, everyone has their strengths, everyone has their weaknesses. You're going to have to do some Google foo. You're going to have to do some searching and seeing what other people have had success with. You're going to have to try downloading them and just running them. When I sing a lot of Linux distros, you can try before you buy, so to speak, that you can plug in the USB key that you put it on, it'll boot up, and you can play with it a little bit before you actually swap it to the hard drive. And some distros will do better with older hardware than others. So,
okay. I've heard Pop OS is one that people like. That this Ubuntu is a famous one. Joanne, you've had a tiny bit of experience installing Ubuntu.
Yes, but I of course have it on Parallels,
right?
Which is a virtual
machine. Yeah.
So it's a little bit different than putting it right on the disk. So, but yeah, they gave me like 2 or 3 choices because I have a newer Mac.
Okay.
And Ubuntu was one of them, and they said this is good for beginners. And it loaded real quick, although I wasn't used to seeing all the script.
Right. Father Cory, why would someone choose? How would you choose between installing in a virtual machine or installing right to the metal, straight on top of the drive?
Right. Well, and again, I think this would depend on what your hardware is. If you're dealing with a newer Mac that you want to put Linux as a second operating system on it, virtual machine would be great. If you're dealing with, like I said, like the old 2009, 2008, somewhere in that era, if you're talking something that's 15 years old, it's not going to have the horsepower and to have the virtual machine plus macOS running and have any kind of performance. So that would be a big concern. Of course, then you'd also have the security issues of macOS if you're running a 10-year-old version of macOS because your hardware is not updated anymore.
Right.
Another thing is the Apple Silicon, the M1s and the soon-to-be M2s and so on are just now starting to get Linux support directly.
Right.
So that could be a real issue. If you want to run Linux, you still need to use the x86 64-bit version under like a virtual machine or an emulator or something like that. By the way, I want to call out, someone who's been a friend of SQPN for years, Jeff Geerling.
Yep.
He's got a great YouTube channel where he talks about a lot of these kind of things, especially he recently brought out a couple of videos about the Apple Silicon support in Linux. So check him out. He's a good one.
Jeff's a big time YouTuber these days. I got to say, I'm really impressed with his channel.
He's in it pretty good.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Got to send him some support.
Yeah, he's great. If you want to get into, he does the really geeky things like installing a 48 drive NAS on a Raspberry Pi things. Just really awesome stuff like that. Well, speaking of which, actually, I have a Raspberry Pi and that has a version of Linux on it, the Raspbian OS. So I guess I've got a little experience there. So you've decided to install Linux on an old Mac. How do you do it? How do you install it? Where do you get it?
And Joanne, you can probably talk to a little bit about this, but I would argue that the Linux install is actually easier than Windows.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean you're not going to have speed bumps. Ultimately, if Linux is going to work, what you do is you download the ISO, you download the install image from whatever distro, Ubuntu or Red Hat, or I guess Fedora they call it, or Linux Mint or Pop OS, whichever distro you've chosen to try. You download it and then you burn to just a USB thumb drive, about a 16 gig, I think is usually the minimum. 32 gig is what I've been using. And then there's an app that I gave Dom the link. It's called Bellina Etcher. And this is, I think, one of the more popular of the cross-platform tools. You run the app, you plug in your USB drive, you say this file, this drive, go.
Okay.
And it creates that live USB. It creates that USB installer that you then just put in the Mac and you boot it up.
So I just want to, I want to back up for a sec. So on another Mac, say on your Mac that you're not converting, say you would run this.
Right. Or Mac or Windows or Linux. You could do it on the Mac if you haven't blown everything away yet.
Yes. Okay. That's what I was going to say. So you run this and it sets up the thumb drive with whatever it's going to need to do so that when you put it in the Mac that you're going to instill Linux on, that's going to, just to be clear, that's going to blow away everything that's on that drive right now, right? It's going to format the drive.
There are ways that you can not do that.
Okay.
And when you're doing the install, when you actually make the choice to install, because again, it's going to boot into a live environment. It's going to boot into, you're running it off of that USB key. It has not touched your hardware. And by the way, I've gotten the habit of calling them USB keys, not USB thumb drives. I should make that clear. USB thumb drives. It's not touched your hard drive yet. It's not done anything to your hardware. It's just running that particular distro off of that USB thumb drive.
Okay.
Eventually, you can have the choice to either do the easy install, which is wipe and replace, or you can do some repartitioning. Linux has tools that can take the macOS operating system that's on the hard drive and shrink that partition.
Okay.
Without damaging macOS.
All right.
Now on Parallels, they only give you a couple of choices.
Mm-hmm.
So my choices were Ubuntu, Fedora, Debian, and Kali.
Yeah.
Those were the 4 that I was allowed to choose from.
Right.
Those are the big names, right?
Yep. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Fedora used to be called Red Hat, and that's one I tried, and I had some issues with on my particular Mac, and I'll talk about that. Hardware is kind of a concern, but yeah, there's a couple big ones. You can really get into the weeds if you want to start looking at distros. There are people that put out distros that have very tight, specific things that they do, and that gets a little too in the weeds, I think, for most people. Ubuntu, Fedora,
which is why I chose something that looked like I've heard it before. So it's like, okay, that's going to be okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and I should mention Debian is what you could call the upstream version of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is built off of Debian. And that's one thing you're going to find too, is that there are distros that are based off of distros. Linux Mint is the other one that I mentioned. That one's distro off the distro. It's built from other distros.
People take it, they modify it, they call it something new. Right. So you've got the Bellina Etcher is a nice way. So you're running. So first you can run the computer off of the thumb drive. So you could just stop there, right? You could just say, I want to, boot up off of the thumb drive and when I want to run Linux on this, and that's where I want to do, and I don't want to touch anything else. I just want to run it like this. But or you could install it and just kind of change it over to a Mac Linux computer.
Right.
Okay.
Or completely Linux altogether.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got all these different options. The problem with the thumb drive, though, is a lot of them are still USB 2. So they're going to be slow.
Yeah. That's
it's
true.
usable, but it's not a speed demon by any stretch of the imagination. Excuse me.
So what were the pitfalls and problems that you encountered in doing this? What were some of the things that people might run into while they're trying to get this going?
Well, one big thing is, if you know anything about the Intel Macs, they're by and large off-the-shelf components. Most of the stuff that Apple put in these computers were off-the-shelf chips. So your Bluetooth and your Wi-Fi and your webcam and all that stuff. But certain versions of Macs have different chips that are more or less supported by Linux.
Okay.
Linux has fairly incredible support for hardware. And some of it is because the open source community has reverse engineered it and figured it out. Some of it because, like NVIDIA, for example, support directly their hardware on Linux. And so you may run into like certain editions, like say my 2015 MacBook Pro that I'm using right now. I don't think the Bluetooth works. Either the Bluetooth or Wi-Fi I don't believe works under Linux. I could be speaking wrong, but there are certain laptops where you won't get Wi-Fi. There are certain laptops you won't get Bluetooth. Webcams are historically an issue within. So if being able to use your built-in webcam, that could be a concern for you. Okay. So like I said, most things will run. Obviously, the operating system will run on the processor because they are off-the-shelf Intel processors. Intel, by and large, did not make Mac editions of their processors. So that's not an issue. Another issue I ran into is the startup manager, the boot menu, the device that, you got to hold down the option key. You pretty much have to use a wired keyboard. Wireless keyboards don't wake up fast enough.
Right.
Because Mac just goes, okay, you've got 2 seconds, you're done.
Yeah. I mentioned this last week where when I was setting up my Mac Studio, that it wouldn't recognize either my trackpad or my I have a wired keyboard, but it wouldn't recognize my trackpad. And actually my wired keyboard was being flaky, but that was because of something else on the USB chain. And I ended up having to grab the keyboard and mouse off of my Raspberry Pi and using those, which was a tip I mentioned last week, is everyone should have a wired mouse and a wired keyboard. The cheap ones that you bought at the corner store are fine for $10 as a pair, in a closet somewhere for troubleshooting. That's just the thing that everyone should have in their toolbox. So you're right. The Bluetooth doesn't come up fast, doesn't recognize at a low enough level for you to use that as a setup for Linux or anything.
And I have one of those wireless, what I've been using for this is one of those wireless Logitech keyboards with the trackpad built in, the little tiny one, the K400s, I think it is. And that even wasn't fast enough booting up, because it's a regular wireless USB. So it's got the little dongle that sits in the back of the Mac, but it still wasn't coming up fast enough.
Right.
So, so you need an actual wired keyboard to be able to do this. Okay. So that's a good point, though. It is good to have just a plain wired keyboard just to be ready. Yep. And then one concern might be if your Mac that you're looking at doing this is still getting firmware updates, meaning still getting macOS updates, you cannot firmware update your system without updating macOS. Apple has tied the two together. And I had an issue with that on this device, on this laptop, where I had changed the internal SSD and it caused a firmware problem with macOS.
Oh, okay.
So you've got to be careful. I couldn't update macOS. I think it was to Big Sur because of this firmware issue. So if you want to make sure you keep getting firmware updates, you need to have a bootable macOS, even if it's like, 100 gigabyte partition on your hard drive to just boot up, do the update, and then leave.
Yeah. That's the, and if your Mac is more than, I think it's 7 or 8 years old now, they're not getting updates anymore. They officially, there's a list on Apple's website of which Macs are obsolete enough. So that would be you would certainly be a good candidate for this, because at least this way you've got a version of Linux on there that is getting updates and that sort of thing. So what about security, malware, virus protection? Because that'll be. Is that different for, is Linux more susceptible to that thing than Macs are, Mac OS?
No, I think it's actually less. Of course, Linux is actively developed. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of people throughout the world who every package is being gone over. Everything, if there's a security problem found, it's updated very quickly, usually within days. Sometimes faster than Windows and Microsoft and Apple both are going, there's not a problem. Oh, Linux already fixed it.
Okay.
So they're very good. And that actually is a good reason why to install Linux, is because if you have an older Mac OS version that's not receiving security updates anymore, there are bugs that, Apple has fixed where it has gone back 15 years in Mac OS.
Yep.
But they've only updated, so many editions, versions of it.
Basically, I think Apple is updating like security updates for the last 3 years. So like right now, I think it's Big Sur, Catalina, and Monterey, and anything older than that is not getting updates in general. And then when Monterey gets replaced by, I don't know, Death Valley, whatever California landmark, the Big Sur will fall off the back end. So you have to be cognizant of that. And yes, so if you're using it, if you're still running macOS Yosemite or some of those older ones, or Maverick on an old Mac, you're safer with Linux on it, because the Linux is going to be up to date. You should get an antivirus. You should have malware. Like I think Malwarebytes even runs on Linux. A lot of these packages will run on Linux, and you should have these security protections, but that definitely should be there. Yeah.
Is that the same for a virtual machine?
You should have malware protection. Yeah.
No, but what I'm saying is, you're talking about putting these on the metal. Right. If you're in a virtual machine, and you're not able to upgrade the Mac OS, are you still getting protected?
No.
See, that's the concern I mentioned earlier. Is if you are in a virtual machine on an outdated version of Mac OS, your hardware is still at risk because of that outdated version of Mac OS.
You're still getting Mac OS running there. Yeah.
Yeah. Even if all you do is just have Mac OS running, and then the only thing that's running on Mac OS is the virtual machine, you're still going to have the risk.
You're still, yeah.
Okay.
I just want to be clear about that for folks like me who like to run these things on virtual machines.
So that's a little bit of why we would install Linux, just because if we have an obsolete OS, this is not a up-to-date OS that gives us more protection. What can I do on Linux? What software can I install?
Well, and one thing I want to mention, I forgot to add with why installing Linux is, if you are running on an older hardware, there are Linux distros that are designed for that, which means they will run faster than Mac OS will. So that's another thing to think about.
Okay.
But what software, there's, for a lot of things that most people do, most people, if we're really honest, we use our systems for browsing the web. We use our systems for checking email. We use our systems for word processors. We use our systems for games. We use, we don't really use, most people, I would venture, especially your home users, don't use dedicated software that needs to be on a Mac or on a Windows system. Right. You could run, a Linux equivalent. There's a lot of Linux equivalents. Now, like, you won't have Microsoft Office, but there's LibreOffice. LIBRE, LibreOffice is a very good for most people. Again, when you use Microsoft Office, how often do we use all the bells and whistles that aren't in the other versions?
90% of the people use 20% of the features, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you've got things like, these open source mail clients and, like I said, Office tools. If you use Firefox, if you use Google Chrome, there are versions of those available on Linux, and it's the same browser, works the same way, and it does all the same things. So like we use our Google Meet here for our recording, it runs just fine on Linux, stuff like that.
Okay.
One thing that's a big game changer in the recent years, last 5 years or so, is Steam support for games on Linux. Valve has done a lot of work both to have native games where you develop it using the Steam API and it will run on Linux natively. But they also do on what's called Wine. The Wine is not an emulator. It's an API interface. They by the way, open source likes these. Let's take an acronym and put the acronym in the name of it. So Wine is not an emulator.
Right.
WINE. But what it allows you to do is run Windows apps on Linux. And they have put a lot of support. Steam has given a lot of support. So there are Windows apps that run well on Wine. And there are games that are Windows only games that Steam has ported to this Wine. They call it the Proton, I believe. Mm-hmm. And the game runs just fine on Linux.
Nice. And that's a thing I want to emphasize is the speed. That's one of the big benefits of doing this is because Linux tends to be a lighter operating system. So some of these anyway, like Linux Mint. And so on older hardware, it doesn't have all of the overhead that newer operating systems like Monterey are trying to do. So that's why it will run faster. That's a big thing.
I will say, if there's, like I said, more dedicated software, if you're doing video editing and you're familiar with like Final Cut Pro, there really isn't a good option that's the equivalent. I mean, there are some editors and they work, but they're still a little clunky.
Don't expect to get Microsoft Office or the Adobe Creative Suite or those things. No. But you can get things like Blender, which is a high-end 3D animation thing, and other things like that. But if you need those things, you already know this. Like you already know,
exactly.
Like if you use those high-end things. But for most regular folks at home or in a church office, frankly, this is a great option because churches often have old hardware. LibreOffice or the Google Suite on, in the browser, like Google Docs and Sheets, are fantastic options that work just fine under Linux. Exactly.
So I think most people, if you're looking into this, you'll be fine under Linux. You'll have no problems. You'll have no, it's just going to be learning, a different interface. And once you learn the different interface, it's pretty easy to work with. It's actually kind of fun too sometimes.
Yeah.
My question is specific to the kind of job that jobs that I work with. How do you convince people in ministry to not, and they're both laughing already because they know where I'm going with this question, to use something like LibreOffice instead of Word so that you can keep their computers going? Because that there's at least in a closet somewhere in every rectory 5 or 10 old laptops that you could do this to and they would run just fine. But they're going to say, where's Word? Where's Excel?
I'll tell you how to convince the pastor and the business manager is it's free. So that's the big one. So LibreOffice is free. You're keeping old hardware rolling. You don't need to buy a new computer, Father. This is you can keep using your older computer, and it will still have a mouse, and it will still have icons, and it will look just the same.
The funny part is, of course, people have had to, with Word and Excel and all these, they've had to do change after change after change as Microsoft has changed things. And, how do you find it now on the ribbon toolbar versus the menus and the buttons? And so you just tell them, it's just a new version of Microsoft Office, just called LibreOffice now.
Well, that's true too. But you can also go through the browser, I would suspect.
You could do, yes.
That you can go to Microsoft through the browser.
Right. Microsoft lets you do Office in the browser, and that would probably work just the same too.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the other thing is Safari, they don't have a way to put Safari on.
Not on Linux.
No. Not on Linux? Okay.
Your options are generally, I think, Chrome, Firefox, Brave.
Chrome, Firefox, Brave. There's a couple of those others.
I would bet Opera works. I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think there's a Linux version of Opera, if I recall. I haven't used it in years.
Vivaldi is another one that's on there too. So yeah. So I don't know if Microsoft Edge isn't, but I know Safari's not.
No.
So no Edge, Edge, no Safari.
All right.
But there's a lot of other things. So
one thing I anticipate some listeners asking is all right, we're talking about Linux on Mac. Why are we just talking about Linux on Mac? What about Linux on Windows? And the reason being is that's already what Linux does. Linux already is basically runs on Windows PC hardware. So if you buy a Dell or Acer or whatever out there, that's already how most people run Linux on machines. They just buy a regular PC. But this was a special case for, well, what if you have a Mac? It's not the same, and that's why we're talking about it in that case.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, that's awesome, Father Cory. Thank you for going through all of that and taking one for the team to figure out how to do this. If listeners have additional questions that you would like, or tips or advice you would like to give to people about putting Linux on a Mac, you can let us know. You can email us at technology@sqpn.com, or jump into the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord, and you can ask your questions there, and we have a nice conversation back and forth.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, before we move on to the next part of the show, I want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Technology, including Tess W., Philip G., Danny L., Joshua G., and Gray B. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Technology and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So our first headline, nothing really big happened in tech this week. I'm just kidding.
No.
Let me laugh.
The big news in tech this week is that the world's richest man, Elon Musk, has struck a deal to buy Twitter for, and everyone has to tell you the number, $44 billion, which is not literally coming out of his bank account. Those sorts of deals include lots of loans and other investors joining in and that sort of thing. Yeah, this has caused a lot of conversation. Some people are concerned. Everybody's got an opinion on it, so why don't we throw ours in as well?
Sure.
But the big thing is just to say what, in his own words, why he's doing this is he wants to. He says he wants to promote free speech, and he feels like Twitter, as one of the major public squares of our time, that it has not been transparent enough in how it's regulating speech on the platform. He feels like it's too restrictive towards some speech. So his plan is to make the algorithm more transparent. And so the algorithm, that's become a buzzword that people use for all kinds of things. But I think more specifically, how it shows you, the computers decide to show you which tweets, because the regular Twitter client doesn't show you everything in reverse chronological order of people you follow, but it decides you might want to see this one more than another one. But also things like encouraging free speech, to end the more vigorous policing of speech that has been happening, that sort of thing. So what do y'all think first, just off the top, of this happening? And then we can talk about maybe what we can hope to see from Twitter and other social media as we go forward. How about you, Father Cory?
Well, it's kind of funny. You can imagine being able to just raise $44 billion in a week. That must be kind of nice. Nice. I'm lucky I could raise $44 in a week. No, I got some cautious hope. Admittedly, I'm to put disclaimer here. I'm very happy with Elon Musk because he gave me good internet at home thanks to Starlink. So
right. Okay.
I mean, there is that, but. No, there's been concerns with Twitter for some time that certain speech that should be allowed, I would argue, isn't. We're not talking about abusive speech. We're not talking about scamming. We're not talking about stuff like that. We're talking about political speech that is absolutely legitimate political speech, is legitimate disagreements, and Twitter takes one side of the argument. And the other side is not allowed to present. There's been real concern about that, whether it's through shadow banning, through outright banning, through deleting tweets, and so on. So I'm hoping this will be a good thing. It'll be nice to see how the algorithm works, because one of the nice things about Twitter when it first came out is you saw a chronological feed, and then they started tweaking that, and they tweaked it a little bit more and tweaked it a little bit more. And now it's not even close.
Right. As we talked about in that our special, when we discussed that Netflix documentary, they tweak it to get engagement. And that's one of the things that has perhaps been one of the downsides of social media, is engagement sometimes equals outrage. And so what happens was, when they tweak the algorithm, they're tweaking the outrage. And that has not been good for our society. I want to just jump. I want to get to your response, Joanne, too. But I want to remark on something you said too about one of the concerns for a lot of people like me is things that a regular Orthodox Catholic might say are banned on Twitter. Like you cannot, talk about certain sexual moral ethics issues on Twitter without getting a ban. I have censored myself. I have purposefully not said things on Twitter because I don't want to deal with getting, a slap on the wrist or go to Twitter jail for 2 days or however long.
Sometimes it's not even putting out a positive, this is what I believe. It's saying, like, say, for example, a certain war over in, Eastern Europe. I think both sides have some real issues to be worried about.
Right.
Neither side is pristine in this war. And even that gets you shadow banned. Even that gets you censored, Yeah.
Joanne, what about you? I don't want to give you a chance to mention. Yeah.
Well, I'm having huge issues with very rich people getting to do things that the normal person can't. Okay, a normal person, like you said, you end up in Twitter jail, or you end up in Facebook jail for saying the wrong things. Yet, someone who has the money can buy something like this and then say, okay, y'all can do whatever you want, or you can't, or I don't like that, or I'm having issues with this kind of stuff because it's still an infringement on free speech. No matter what, I mean, somebody owns this now.
Well, someone always owned it, though.
Right. Yeah. But this guy has been very vocal about a few things. And it's like, okay, so now he owns the playground. What's going to happen?
I would say in response, someone else. So it's just someone else owning the playground with a different point of view than the previous owner. So these are all private enterprises that they get to set the rules. They're not public venues. They're not owned by by the government or by the people. And so on the one hand, that's their prerogative. And yeah, it comes down to, I mean, this is not new to Elon Musk. Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post and owns Amazon. Zuckerberg has got Facebook, and this has been a question is these billionaires getting to decide how these big venues, these public squares work. And as a society, we've not yet figured out how to deal with that. Or what do we get to tell them they can't do that? And so some responses previously to Musk buying Twitter have been to people like, well, go start your own. And people have like Getter or MeWe or Truth Social, which
that's a whole other issue.
Yeah. And some people have gone to those and a lot of people have not. And
I would rather see a proliferation of a lot of those where people can speak as freely as they want, but not take something as big as a Twitter and now say, okay, so now we're going to put it in an even. It's just a whole free speech thing. I think people need to know we don't have free speech. And if we do have free speech, we have to know when to take those consequences.
Well, we don't have free speech on Twitter. Is that what you mean? And
you can, if we put something up on Facebook, for example, that is Catholic bent, it gets taken down.
Sure.
Or
Twitter
Right. Yep. So where's my free speech?
Right. There's no absolute free speech on any private social network. That is true. I mean, there's no absolute free speech, period. There's things you can't say, but yes, I agree.
And one concern too with the go build your own is people have gone build their own and then the other sites attack them and have their own taken down.
Right.
Or
get Apple and Google to take their apps off the stores. Yes.
Yep, exactly.
That's true.
So, so it's, like I said, I don't have a problem with this. We'll see what Elon Musk does. Will he, because he wants to open it up where you can say it, and again, as long as it's not like really abusive, not just like you hurt my feelings, but like, okay, this person has just threatened me and my dog. That kind of abusive. Yeah.
To be honest, what I would like to see is like, as long as there's a block button where I can block people, I'm almost like, let's turn the dial. It's always about turning a dial, more or less. Turn the dial up and let people go. And if I don't like what people are saying, I'll block them, Yep.
And it should be up to us.
Right. In the past 10 years or so, the dial has been turned toward if people make me feel bad about myself, and I'm kind of get a little controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway, what the dial has been turned toward, if people make me feel bad about myself, if they say things that make me feel bad, then they shouldn't have the ability to say that. So if someone makes me feel bad about my choices that I've in my lifestyle, that they should be shut down. Especially if they're saying those things from a particular religious or political point of view that isn't mine. And I have a problem with that. I have a problem with shutting down certain viewpoints. You don't have a right to you don't have a right to be wrong. Like, no, people have a right to be wrong, and let's let truth have a battle with falsehood. And if truth is true, it'll win. And people need to, I think in general in our society, we've kind of gotten toward suppress other people's speech if we don't like it.
Right. Yeah, I think we need to learn how to live together and agree to disagree.
Yes.
But even people can't figure out what that is anymore.
Right.
If you don't agree with me, you're a bad person. That's the blanket.
Right. It's not simply that I think you're wrong. It's that you're evil and you have no right. So one thing I would like to see as a result is, first, I don't think Elon Musk is the second coming. I don't think he's going to.
No.
I don't think he perfectly aligns with my point of view on politics or religion or any of those things like that. I admire the fact that he's done things like build Tesla and build SpaceX and that sort of stuff. I really do. And I like some of what he's saying, but a few concrete things I'd like to see. It would be nice to get clear explanations of what exactly community standards are. Yes. What specific behaviors and words will lead to Twitter jail or whatever. You know what I mean? It has been so up in the air. Like, oh, you violated our community standards. Like, what was it? Melanie quoted the Princess Bride, almost like you kill you in the morning, that whole line.
Yep.
And got put in Facebook jail like for 12 hours because like it's a movie quote. Like, or when I got Facebook banned because I quoted St. Augustine, man is a miserable creature or something. It's like we don't, but a lot of times people get banned and they're like, I don't understand why. Like,
the robots aren't trained the algorithm is not trained to distinguish between it should be a quote from something obscure or a movie and what somebody is saying, and they don't understand intent.
Well, just the fact that you have an AI that decides who's going to get banned or not should already be part of the problem.
Right.
Someone was posting a silly meme the other day. It was like an innocuous, like, I don't know, Kermit the Frog or something. And they got it taken down because of it was related to human trafficking and exploitation. And you're looking going, Kermit? Like, it was this bizarre, it didn't make any sense. And this is the thing is it's a kind of gaslighting because no one really knows what behavior is going to lead to discipline. That's a kind of emotional and mental abuse. You know what I mean? And that's how these moderations on Facebook and Twitter and these places are doing. So that's one of the things I'm really hoping for is to see clear explanations of what will lead to moderation of your content. So it'll be interesting to see how things go. All right, let's move on to something that's a little bit related, which is another headline. Google, Meta, i.e. Facebook, and the others will have to explain their algorithms under some new EU legislation. So this is a story out of The Verge, and the European Union has passed a new law called the, I want to get it right, Digital Services Act, which will require large tech companies, online services, to do a few things. One, to make their algorithms transparent. That's one thing we've been talking about that Elon Musk has been saying. So they need to make how their algorithms decide what to show you, how they does that. To end dark patterns. We've talked about that on the show a few times. These are confusing or deceptive user interfaces that are designed to steer users into making certain choices. If you've ever gotten a dialog box where you like the OK button is huge and the cancel or no button is this tiny little thing you have to search for, that's a deceptive practice or a dark pattern. And then one of the things I find most controversial, though, is a ban on targeted advertising based on individuals' religion, sexual orientation, or ethnicity. And I understand what they're trying to prevent is discrimination against people, but this is a problem for religious groups. You know, if I
very much so.
I in the past have often used Facebook's advertising to promote our podcast, but I want to promote them first to say Catholics who would be interested in like Catholics who like Star Trek are a great audience for Secrets of Star Trek. Now I want a lot more than just Catholics can enjoy it, but that's where I wanted to start. But if I can't advertise based on that, or if I've got selling first communion dresses, I'm you know what I mean, or that sort of thing, I can't target the Catholic religious group. I don't know. That just seems bad to me. What do you think?
Yeah, because there's quite a few things that we would target as Catholics or religious groups would target that other people really aren't interested in.
Right.
But if it has to be a broad thing, it's explain again. They want it to be a narrow thing or a broad thing.
You're not allowed to advertise to someone based on their religion, sexual orientation, or ethnicity. So you can't go into the Facebook ads and say, I want to find all Catholics in the U.S. Between the ages of 18 and 65. That's not allowed anymore. Age is another one that you can't do as well.
Yeah, but see, they wouldn't want a podcast on liturgy, so why would I want to put that out there to the entire world? I'd want to narrow my marketing strategy to get to the people who really would want to hear something like this.
Well, I'm thinking too, if a parish wanted to do like an ad campaign to promote something like That Man Is You, or the light is on for confessions or whatever, you're obviously going to want to address it to Catholics in your area. A Lutheran's not going to care that the parish is having confessions. A Muslim definitely won't. You know, someone who is atheist definitely won't.
Right.
You know, so it's like,
they might be offended.
Yeah.
Right.
And push the, button that says this offends me.
Right.
Exactly.
On Facebook.
Into Facebook jail.
Right.
It used to be the tools were so granular, you could almost target an individual. In fact, I was reading a book a while ago about promoting on Facebook, and the guy was saying that he did this for his wife for her birthday, where he created a Facebook ad that was so targeted that she's the only person who would see it. And so when she went on Facebook, the ads were all like to her, and which is funny. Cute. But they've dialed it back so much over the years. And part of the problem is when you have a large audience, it gets much more expensive to run those ads. So when you have a large undifferentiated audience, it also puts the advertising out of reach of small nonprofits and like parishes and groups like us. So I have a problem with this law. The thing is it's an EU law, so it technically only really applies to the European Union, but like a lot of these other things that these, super restrictive laws, a lot of companies are like, I'm not going to make up laws just for the, change policies just for the European Union. I'm going to just implement this worldwide and you deal with it.
Well, and one example we see of that is how many times you go to a website and, this website uses cookies.
Oh
that first came in because of the EU data protection law, which is a good law by and large. But the biggest thing is it gives you that stupid pop-up that you have to hit accept all cookies, accept some cookies, accept no cookies.
Yeah. And nobody pays attention to the pop-up anymore. Everyone just automatically clicks it, which is a problem.
That's what I do. Yeah. I click because it's like, and it's worse when I use Flipboard.
Yeah.
So when I go to these sites, it's almost like 3/4 of my screen says, hello, we do cookies. What do you think?
Yep. Yeah.
Like, I don't care.
GDPR, I think, is the thing. Yeah. It's just, it's a hassle. Anyway. So let's go to our next headline. If you've been sharing your Netflix password or using someone else's, like mom's or dad's, that might be coming to an end. So Netflix is finally going after password sharing, and this is how they're going to do it. They're not cutting you off, and that's good to hear. So what they plan to, and I should state up front, in the past, Netflix has basically encouraged password sharing.
Oh yeah.
They sent a tweet out in 2017, love is sharing a password. So they were okay with it while they were building audience. They were more interested in eyeballs than subscribers. Well, just this past fiscal quarter, they, for the first time ever, had a decline in the number of subscribers, and that's got a lot of people worried. So Netflix has said that in the U.S., worldwide, more than 100 million households are using a shared password. 100 million, including 30 million in the U.S. and Canada. So what they plan to do, and they've started testing this in a few countries, is charging an additional fee to add a sub-account for up to 2 people outside the home. So you have your main account, and then if you want to have people outside the home use it, they have to pay an additional lesser fee. And right now it varies based on exchange rates, but it's somewhere around $2 or $3 in some of these other countries. There's a lot of question around implementing it. What if I have a college kid at college? What if I go on vacation and I want to, watch Netflix while I'm at the beach house or something? And then there's also the question of how many people are going to go for this or just cancel altogether or not bother to sign up for a sub account. So what do you all think of this just in general, the password sharing and cracking down on it?
I have not done any password sharing up until recently. No, and I have listened to all of my friends who have done it repeatedly over the years. And the thing is that, number one, I believe that Netflix lost a lot more this past quarter because they jacked up their rates.
Yes.
This has nothing to do with anything else, but they keep jacking the rates up. And if you're not watching Netflix a lot, like I don't watch it religiously, then, $17 a month becomes a little cost prohibitive in the grand scheme of things. So, yeah, if you have somebody to share that with, it becomes more manageable. And if you're given 2 or 3 logins anyway, then, and they promoted that in the beginning, what's the problem? They're still making money. The right. Corporate jets are still on the going and flying. They're still making a profit.
So far. Well, that's the thing is I think their biggest problem is that they're losing out on the content battle. A lot of the content that they were living off of, which was other people's intellectual properties like Friends and those things, are moving to streaming services owned by the IP owners, Disney and those guys. And yet they're still, so they need to make more of their own original content, which they haven't been as much.
But they've got so much content on there, and some of it is icky.
Oh, some of it is
it's just so trite. It's like they kept throwing money at people saying, "Here, create this," and I'm like, really? I wouldn't watch it.
Yeah.
And there's also the popular practice of I'm going to watch The Crown for 2 months and then I'm going to get rid of Netflix and come back later when The Crown comes on the next season. So I just think if they do a little cost cutting of their own, maybe scale back a little on the amount of content they're trying to fill in there, and they go back to some of what they were known for in the beginning, which was movies.
Right.
A lot of us have been with Netflix since we were able to get the DVDs by mail. Yeah. Go back to movies.
I might have one or two of those still around here somewhere.
That's a collector's item.
Yeah, right.
But I think if they might have to reevaluate their business plan. Yeah. But instead of keep jacking that price up, because you know what? That's what's going to make them lose people, or have folks do this kind of thing. Because I'll tell you, if they come to me and say, a little bit more money, I'm going to say I'm going to Hulu.
Yeah. Right. And that last one's kind of the big point. They're no longer the only game in town. When they first came out with their streaming services, they were the only game in town. And for $10, you could basically you could eat everything they had on streaming. Now, it wasn't much, but it was a start. But I think the idea of them losing market share because they're losing material is really true. Star Trek, for example, is no longer available in Netflix in many areas because now it's all on Paramount Plus. Right. Other services have dropped other things, and then you've got Amazon that's out there, and they're just as big as far as what you can get through streaming and so on. So, and admittedly, I'm as I said, I'm sitting at my dad's house, and I've got an Apple TV sitting under his big screen TV with all my logins to services. So
right.
I mean, I'm as guilty as anybody else. I don't have Netflix. I don't currently have Netflix, but I've got other services that I use and that I've given him access to as well. So,
and the other services so far have not, said anything about cracking down on password sharing, which, maybe they're going to see how it goes for Netflix.
Yeah, they're watching.
So one of the data points they said was they did a survey, and they suggested about 80% of Americans who use someone else's password wouldn't get their own new account if they couldn't share the password. So I think that's why Netflix is going with this middle way, which is to say, well, look, we're not going to make you get your very own $17 a month account. We'll instead just ask you to pay $3 a month to live off this other person's account. That may be a way that's successful for them. And frankly, I don't think that's asking much, Frank. I mean, it would kind of rankle me if I'm paying it's like your neighbor coming in and hooking into your cable box to get cable for free, like splicing into yours. It's like, I'm the one paying for it, So if I'm a parent with my kids, that's probably where a lot of that is. Parents and kids living, or in both directions, like Father Cory said. But it's probably a lot of families, and I think the biggest crackdown will be on the big abusers, people who have like 15 people sharing their password.
Yeah, I know people who do that.
Yeah.
Seriously. In my case, and I'll be very transparent and honest as much as I can, it's a cost-cutting measure, and it's also allowing someone out of the country to watch American Netflix.
Right.
So and we share the cost. We're splitting the cost in half. So...
Yeah, that VPNing in to get the content from a different country that's only available there. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. So let's our last headline is a fun little story. It's a baseball story. So Major League Baseball is going to allow pitchers and catchers to use anti-sign stealing technology during regular season. If you're not a baseball fan, what happens is the catcher's the guy behind the plate. The pitcher throws the ball past the bat. I'm really going to be basic here. Throws the ball past the batter. Batter's trying to hit it, and the catcher has to signal to the pitcher what kind of pitch he wants. There are different kinds of pitches he can throw in different places over the plate. That's all you really need to know. And historically, traditionally, the way they do it is they use finger signs. Like they point a finger in different directions, 2 fingers, 3 fingers. They tap their inner thigh or whatever, that sort of thing. 1 finger down is a fastball, etc. So. But that is susceptible to some guy in the outfield with a long lens or binoculars,
or even a runner at second base.
Yes,
could see him just as clearly.
Coming. Yeah, if the batter knows what kind of pitch is coming, that's gonna give him an advantage. So Major League Baseball is now going to let them use a sort of electronic remote. Father Cory, what do you know about this?
Yeah, it's kind of cool. It basically it's similar to technology that's been used in like the NFL and things like that to send plays. So it's the same idea. Is the catcher has a little remote control on his wrist. It looks like, I got to bring up Stargate here. It looks like the GDO, the garage door opener from Stargate, where you punch in the code, and the catcher has like the little flip up thing, like you've seen quarterbacks use, and it says, okay, if I press button 1, it's fastball. If I press button 5, it's inside, top inside, so wherever he punches. And so as he's sitting there and the batter's doing his little warm up beside the plate for the next pitch, he punches a couple of buttons, and then the pitcher hears it. He has a speaker in his hat, his baseball cap, where he hears what the catcher sent. And so that allows them to do it other languages. That allows them to do, if they're even concerned about people being able to hear that, they can do code words. And so instead of fastball, it could be hot,
Right.
and things like that, so they can do different things. So it's really kind of yeah.
Sorry,
Omaha.
Yeah. So it's really kind of a cool technology, and it's really been it's up to the pitcher and catcher. They don't have to use this, but if they do, if they want to use it, they're able to do it. And I think most pitchers and catchers are using it. There's a few that aren't, but most I think are using it because it makes it easier for both.
Yes. I would say baseball is one of the most tradition bound games out there. But there's if you change the type of mustard that they're selling in the stands, people freak out. So, how have fans taken this? I mean, has there been a lot of blowback on it? People think it's a terrible thing.
I haven't seen any. I haven't heard of any. You know, what little I've been reading on this, I haven't. I think most fans think it's kind of cool.
Yeah,
because it works. It works well.
As a fan, knowing especially that most of the players now are multilingual, it's probably a better idea. And if they are coming from different places, the Dominican Republic and Japan, their signal signs could be a little bit different.
Right.
So now basically what they're hearing is they're not confusing. Oh, does that really mean that? Or am I thinking in my own country?
Sure.
So I think this might be something that's good. Now, I'm sure someone's going to figure out how to hack into one of these little things.
Right.
I'm going to guess
just because they can.
I'm going to guess they're end-to-end encrypting it. I would hope.
I would hope.
Yeah.
But I mean, there was a sign stealing controversy where I think there was a guy in the dugout was passing signs via his Apple Watch or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Alex Cora got a little trouble for that one. And thank God we have him back in Red Sox Nation.
Yes, yeah, there you go.
But I just feel that, look, baseball is a very traditional game, and it's also a very slow game.
Yeah.
And sometimes on television, it's, you have to have the filler with your color man and your announcer. And sometimes it can get really crazy. So anything they can do to bring the younger crowd into this game, and this, this is a technological thing, do it.
And speed things up.
Red Sox Nation is long for, we have 3-hour, 4-hour games because we just do that.
Right. But
it needs to be a little bit faster too, but it's never going to be football. It's never going to be hockey, and it's also never going to be golf.
Right.
So.
And I should mention the statistic that in a game, there is actually more minutes of in play in baseball than football.
That's
the
true.
difference with football, they have a play, they repeat it on the TV 3 times, and then you see the next play. Baseball, they don't do that.
And that's how they've used technology to do it. But now even golf has stats that they're putting up as the golfer is getting ready to, tee up. And they're also putting odds.
Ooh,
which I find very interesting.
The probability of getting the shot. Yeah, it's interesting. Everything is now data and statistics. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so that does it for our headlines. I want to move on to our picks of the week. And Joanne, I'm going to ask you to go first. What's your pick of the week this week?
Well, I have loved this dude for a little bit because he does something called exploding glitter bombs.
Oh, those are great.
Yes, but they're for a good cause. Mark Rober is an evil genius. He really is. And I got to know him through that. And for those of you who don't know what that is, he's trying to find porch pirates. So he will put a glitter bomb with fart spray into a box, usually like an iPhone box or something small, and a porch pirate will grab it and then open the box and he goes, hello, and everything kind of goes off on them and people get, it takes pictures of these people so they can send it to the police.
So let's back up just a sec. So Mark Rober has a YouTube channel.
Yes.
And he's a former NASA and Apple engineer. And he creates these Rube Goldberg sort of devices and fun things, often with, like you said, with a cause, with a purpose. It's not just for the sake of being crazy.
But I didn't know all that until I saw the glitter bomb videos.
Right. Yep.
So I started doing some research, and then a friend of mine sent me that he did this robot piano that catches fire because it plays the world's hardest piece of music, 17 times faster than it should be played. And the man he's got all kinds of other things he's got engineering course, and he's getting kids, I think, interested in this type of stuff because he's attracting them in by doing some outrageous things. I just think he's worth it for the younger crowd. This would be something, get to know who he is and get a little, a little bit more practical science here. Because it all looks like things that you can actually some of them you can actually accomplish.
I think he's like the number 2 or 3 YouTuber out there. Like,
is he really?
With audience?
He's moved up quick. I mean, he's really only been big. I like his squirrel obstacle course
That's
because he
the
had squirrels
best.
that kept going
really?
for his
So
feeder.
funny. Oh my gosh.
And it's hilarious.
Fat Gus. Fat Gus is my favorite squirrel because my spirit squirrel.
But he's doing like animatronics. He's doing secret, he's doing all kinds of Legos, and he's just doing a whole bunch of things.
Garbage cleaning, like a sea cleaning garbage robot, where it cleans up the rivers. And he does all kinds of great stuff. It is well worth it. And the presentation is key because there are a lot of ways you could do this stuff and you'd be kind of blah. He's got an engaging personality. One of the first times I encountered him was actually when I was looking up how to build a better Pinewood Derby car for my kids' Cub Scouts. And so we had a whole channel about the physics of Pinewood Derby and how best to get that to work. And it was fantastic. It was really great. So I second your recommendation, Joanne. Mark Rober's channel.
He's kind of an aw shucks kind of guy, but boy, is he smart. And like I said, he's
brilliant.
an evil genius using his powers for good.
Yeah, definitely check out the glitter bomb the package bombs. He's gone so far as working with I think the FBI to track down these rings of people stealing packages off of porches and that sort of stuff. So it's kind of interesting to see where that is going. There's more to come. Apparently,
apparently he's proving that porch piracy is not a one-off
crime.
thing. There's a ring doing this. So
yep. Excellent. And Father Cory, what's your pick this week?
So obviously I like baseball, talk about the science. So my pick this week is, I'm surprised it hasn't been picked yet, but it's Mlb.tv. If you like watching baseball, especially the pros, you can watch it like every game and usually from the local broadcasts. So if you happen to like, I'm a St. Louis Cardinals fan. If you happen to like their announcers, you can watch their announcers. If they're playing another team and you like the announcers of the other team, you can watch that. You can listen to the audio, which sometimes listening to the radio broadcast is actually more entertaining than watching it on TV because they have to, like you talked, Joanne, where they have to sit there and yap. On the radio, they have to describe what's going on in the field. They can't just show you that the outfield is shifting. They have to describe, the left fielder is shifted over to the right, and they have to actually talk about that. So it's kind of expensive. It's a little over $100 a year or a season, but it's very much, I know Joanne's got a point about that, but it is very much worth it if you're a baseball fan. And they also have MILB, Minor League Baseball.tv. You can also buy if you have a minor league team somewhat close by that does these broadcasts as well. So there's a lot of options as far as watching baseball, but you can watch baseball from wherever. Now, the couple of concerns is blackouts. Baseball blackout rules still apply. So, for example, I was going to watch the Seattle Mariners versus the Twins. Problem, they were playing in Minneapolis, but because it was the Mariners team, I was blacked out because my area is a Seattle broadcast area.
Right. That's the key thing is if, in case people don't know, if you live within the market of a particular team, whether it's the Boston Red Sox, you live in the Boston area, or the New York Yankees, they want you to either go to the game. It's sort of an encouragement to go to games, which most people can't do, or to subscribe to the local cable channel where like the Yankees are Yes, and in New England it's Nesson. So they black out the streaming for you. So that's one of the downsides. However, there are ways around that.
Yes, there are.
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
And
Joanne brought up VPNs. They do help with that.
Yeah, they do very much so. And if you are a T-Mobile customer, it may be too late now, but at the beginning of every April, they will offer you MLB for free.
Right, as part of your
T-Mobile. It goes with your T-Mobile package. You just have a limited amount of time to jump into it.
Right.
So, and that's how I get to watch my beloved Red Sox as a cord cutter.
Yep. But it's if you're a cord cutter but you like watching baseball, it's very much worth it. It's worth every penny. And not just do they have games, you can also watch condensed versions of the games where they take the games and they condense them down into the bigger plays. And they've got shows you can watch, they'll do interviews with players and things like that are only on MLB TV. So there's lots of stuff out there. If you're a huge baseball fan, it's very much worth it. If you want to follow one team and you don't have cable, it's a great way to do it.
Excellent.
And if you and you can get around the blackout thing too, if you wait 90 minutes after the end of the game, they will allow you to watch it.
Yeah, you can watch replays as well.
Right.
Now, there are some blackouts you can't get around because they're national blackouts because they're being broadcast on ESPN or Apple Plus. Apple TV Plus has some games. YouTube has some games. So that's kind of a caveat there. But otherwise, again, once the game's over, hour and a half later, you can watch the replay. So
excellent.
On demand.
Fun. So my pick this week is food related, and this is I'm looking at the website now, and they've got videos of like food being prepared, and it's lunchtime, and I'm really hungry. But it's something I got. I have a new grill and smoker, and I got this for a Christmas present in anticipation of that. It is the Meter Plus thermometer. It's a smart meat thermometer, and what it is it works for indirect heating. That's an important thing. So you can't put this like over like a direct flame. There's a caveat right up front. But what it does is you put it in the meat, and then you have an app on your phone, and it connects via Bluetooth, and you can tell it, I want to cook this to this temperature, and it will track the internal temperature of the meat. It will track the ambient temperature inside your grill or smoker to tell you how hot it is in there. And then it will walk you, if you want, it'll walk you through, that it's at the time to put it on. Now it's the time to rest it and that sort of thing. And it'll track the carryover heat and all that sort of stuff. It was really great that I used when I used it. And it gave me this nice chart. And one thing I found with smoking meat is people always tell you, take notes, keep track of how each smoking session goes, because you will need to change how you go, because it's a very technical thing, and I've realized now, smoking meat, and you want to track how, I did this and this happened, I did that and that happened, and so it gives you charts. It gives you like a temperature chart of both ambient and internal temperatures, and it's really great. It's been a really fantastic little piece of tech. It has a charging block that it goes into, and the charging block has a couple of AA batteries in it that charges it. But the charging block is the base station. So what I do is when I start the grill in the back, on the back patio, I move the charging block close to the house, so it's about 20 feet or so. And then my desk, where I was working last Friday while I was smoking the meat, was another 25 feet or so. So it was extending the range for me like that. So the Meter Plus thermometer.
So let me ask a question. You can put this on a grill?
I think they tell you not to put it over like direct flame. So I wouldn't put it over flame. But if you was like on a big hunk of meat and on the top side of it, that would be work. You can put it in the oven like that works too. So that's
I should get my husband one just for prime rib on Christmas.
Perfect.
There you go.
Perfect. Yeah.
There you go.
It says up to 165 feet wireless range. I kept having dropouts, but I was also on the other side of several walls between me and it. So that was kind of, so I would have to get up, move closer a little bit, come back, sit down, that sort of thing. It's a really fun little thing. And if you could go on YouTube and look at any like YouTube channels of people who regularly are cooking stuff, you'll see they're all using the Meter thermometer. It's a great little thing. It's not an instant read thermometer, which is different, and I still recommend. An instant read is you stick it in, you get a temperature right then, and then you go. This is a long-term cooking thermometer where you're tracking over time. So, excellent. All right, I think that does it. Now I need to go get a bite to eat. But before we do that, those videos of really juicy meat. So we are wrapping up here. So we want to hear from you. What do you think of anything we discussed today? You can comment on the show at sqpn.com/technology or the SQPN Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. You can send an email to technology@sqpn.com. You can visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/Discord. You'll find links from our discussion and our picks of the week on our show notes at sqpn.com. Remember to like each episode of Secrets of Tech on Facebook, retweet them on Twitter where we're at SQPN, and leave us comments wherever you find us. Until next time, Joanne Mercier, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of technology.
Thanks, Dom.
And Father Cory Sticha, thank you as well.
Thank you, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Technology on StarQuest.